Ukrainian agents carried out a precise decapitation strike, killing one of Putin's shadow generals. Shocking battle reports came from the Red Army city front. Russian armored formations were completely annihilated. The dual Putin alliance crushes all of Europe. Trump helped Putin safeguard his frozen assets. Putin held a televised interview, savaging Europeans as stupid, bluntly stating that Trump is Russia's ally. On the Pokrovsk front, 3 Russian soldiers were doing what they do best, not carrying out their commander's orders, but wandering through the gray zone between the two armies, searching uninhabited Ukrainian houses, stealing anything of value. The 2 Russian soldiers appearing on camera had bulging backpacks on their backs. They were excitedly whispering to each other, discussing how much money they could make selling what they stole. As for the assault rifles on them, those things looked more like a burden casually slung on their bodies. Once Ukrainian drones approached, they fled in panic, even abandoning the stolen goods to save their lives. Yesterday morning, Russian forces received a batch of drone reinforcements when their Shade drones appeared over the Red Army city defensive line. Ukrainian soldiers used man-portable air defense missiles, accurately hitting this costly drone. After the drone assault failed, Russian forces dispatched a penetration team. They moved southwest of Red Army City in an armored vehicle to evade Ukrainian fire. The Russian soldiers advanced in a dispersed formation, slowly moving through a trench. But this did not escape Ukrainian drone reconnaissance. After locking onto the enemy, the drone operator dropped munitions directly, instantly eliminating 3 Russian soldiers. The remaining 8 immediately crawled out of the trench and fled into dense forest. Ukrainian drones pursued closely. During the chase, several more Russian soldiers were eliminated. In the end, only 2 Russian soldiers were lucky enough to enter a building. Ukrainian drones gave them no chance to breathe. A 10-kilogram explosive warhead directly demolished the building. This 11-man penetration team was declared completely wiped out. Even the armored vehicle parked at their departure point was located and destroyed by drones. Since yesterday afternoon, Russian forces began assembling armored vehicles at this location. The 414th Drone Brigade was the first to detect the situation and immediately deployed attack drone swarms to strike. Russian forces hastily responded but lacked sufficient air defense firepower. Within 2 hours, Ukrainian forces destroyed 1 OSA air defense system, 2 tanks, 1 infantry fighting vehicle and 1 ammunition-laden transport truck. Violent explosions triggered massive fires, fearing ammunition cook-offs caused by the blaze. Russian soldiers opened vehicle doors and abandoned them to flee. Ukrainian forces seized the opportunity to launch a second wave of drones, confirming hits on 5 more tanks, 6 infantry fighting vehicles, and 8 light transport vehicles. Ukrainian intelligence later confirmed that this armored force gathering here was intended to coordinate with local Russian troops to launch a new assault on Red Army City. The operation was scheduled for that night. Fortunately, Ukrainian forces responded swiftly, destroying the entire armored formation. As a result, the Russian attack plan was aborted. On the morning of the 20th, Russian forces dispatched a reconnaissance team to the armored force assembly point. In their records, they confirmed that all heavy armor, including T-90M and T-80 BVM tanks, had been completely destroyed beyond the front lines. Ukrainian agents yesterday once again set a record by killing a senior Russian general, the commander with the rank of Major General of Russia's military intelligence agency, Andrei Viryanov, and his 7 aides were aboard an oil tanker disguised as a commercial vessel in the Mediterranean Sea when they were locked onto by Ukrainian drones. The drone attack destroyed the ship's propulsion system. The fire triggered by the explosion engulfed the entire vessel. The powerless tanker became the perfect stationary target. The agents launched another wave of drones, completely destroying it. After the explosion, Viryanov did not die immediately. His aides abandoned the severely wounded man, escaping in lifeboats from the immobilized tanker. The subsequent second strike by Ukrainian forces sent Viryanov to his death in the flames. Viryanov was regarded as one of Putin's closest generals. He rarely appeared in public and did not directly participate in the invasion of Ukraine. Instead, he disguised himself as a businessman traveling among EU countries responsible for Russia's energy smuggling and other secret transactions, raising war funds for Putin. At the same time, he was Putin's ACE assassin. In 2018, a former Russian KGB agent, Sergei Skripal, was confirmed to be a double agent bought by the UK. After his identity was exposed, Sergei and his daughter Yulia fled to the UK, seeking political asylum from the London government. Putin ordered Viryanov to secretly execute Sergei. On March 4 of the same year, Sergei and his daughter Yulia, in the city of Salisbury, UK, were exposed to a former Soviet military-grade nerve agent, a 234. Both fell into comas after being poisoned. After treatment by the British government, they regained consciousness 2 months later. After waking up, Sergei uttered a name in terror, Andrei Averyanov, accusing him of being the assassin sent by Putin. For a long time, Averyanov had eliminated many defectors, or Putin's political enemies, according to external rumors, after Wagner Group leader Prigozhin launched his mutiny and threatened Putin's autocratic interests. Putin secretly ordered Averyanov, declaring Prigozhin guilty of a capital crime. Thus, Averyanov immediately orchestrated the plane crash that killed Prigozhin and completely covered up the truth. In addition to helping Putin eliminate rivals, Averyanov was also an excellent businessman. He evaded Western economic sanctions, smuggling Russian energy to European countries in exchange for weapons and equipment, or transferring funds to secret accounts of the Russian Ministry of Defense. As a result, Putin obtained more artillery shells and missiles fired at Ukraine. This operation by Ukrainian agents directly severed one of Putin's arms and also declared to Russia that Ukraine's strike range is no longer limited to the front lines in Russian territory, but can extend into the secret battlefield. Now it is Putin's generals who are living in fear. Russia's shadow trade and espionage activities will also come under pressure from Ukraine. Putin's war funding sources will become even more unstable for the Ukraine-Russia battlefield. This is enough to change the direction of the war. On the morning of the 20th, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense announced that the An-124 heavy transport aircraft damaged by Russian airborne forces on the first day of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 has completed repairs and inspections and officially returned to service today for 4 years. This An-124 had been parked at Hostomel Airport, 10 kilometers from downtown Kyiv. The Ukrainian Defense Forces once fought here for weeks against Russian airborne troops, eventually repelling the invading forces, but the runway, apron, and numerous buildings were severely damaged. This An-124 survived. Zelenskyy allocated $5,000,000 and after 4 years of repairs, this giant aircraft was finally reactivated. This will strongly accelerate the delivery of EU aid supplies, compared with the more than €200 billion frozen overseas. Trump is undoubtedly the most valuable asset in Putin's hands. With just one order from Putin, Trump will go to any lengths to fulfill his master's wishes. At the Brussels summit, Trump bribed Belgium, Hungary, and several other small countries. They acted duplicitously at the summit, almost praising Putin to the skies, claiming that Putin is not to be provoked, and that once Russia retaliates, the entire EU would be turned upside down. The Belgian Prime Minister, nearly hysterically, opposed using Russia's frozen assets. He told all attending heads of state, "Unless you are willing to turn Belgium into an iron barrel, capable of helping us deal with Russian retaliation, then no one should even think about touching a single cent." After hours of fierce confrontation, EU member states reluctantly announced the abandonment of the plan to use Russian assets, because over 90% of Russia's frozen assets in Europe are held in Belgian banking institutions. As long as Belgium objects, the EU can do nothing. This move by Trump struck directly at the EU's vital weakness. In the previous episode, Dasha reported that due to economic downturn, farmer protests erupted across Europe, even impacting the European Parliament. At this time, Ukraine needs more than €100 billion in aid, and urgently, if funds are not in place before next spring. Not only Ukraine's military industry, but even the government itself will immediately go bankrupt. Amid internal and external crises, the European Council came up with a plan to fund Ukraine's defense spending using frozen Russian assets. Trump successfully guarded Putin's wallet. As a result, the EU can only pay out of its own pocket. After the Brussels summit concluded, leaders of various countries jointly announced that they would raise €90 billion from capital markets, providing the funds to Ukraine in the form of interest-free loans. Even so, Hungary remained dissatisfied. Its Prime Minister Viktor Orbán stated that using Russia's money is a road to death. Even if the EU finds its own way to provide funding to Ukraine, it could further escalate the Ukraine-Russia war, because any assistance to Ukraine would invite retaliation from Putin. Clearly, this man has been scared out of his wits. In the end, the European Council had to exempt Hungary from participating in the financing plan. Only then did Orbán leave satisfied. Presumably, this was also Trump's secret instruction. European Council President Costa explained the final agreement reached at the summit to the media. Although Russian assets could not be directly used, the EU will continue to freeze the funds. The 90 billion euros raised from capital markets will initially be repaid by EU countries. Ukraine will not need to pay any interest, nor will it be restricted by a repayment deadline. If the EU is unable to repay the 90 billion euros, further discussions will then be held on unfreezing Russian assets to repay the loans. This marathon summit finally came to an end. Although the result was not ideal, Ukraine can at least catch its breath for now. Over the next 2 years, Ukraine's defense spending faces a shortfall of up to 136 billion euros. The fastest needed capital injection is by April next year. Whether the EU can successfully raise funds in the shortest time is an urgent issue. Otherwise, Ukraine will be defeated next year, without even fighting. This is tremendous good news for Trump and Putin. After the Brussels summit closed, Belgian Prime Minister Bart De Wever held a press conference. A reporter criticized him for blocking the EU from using Russian assets. De Wever actually laughed and said, "I have a villa in St. Petersburg, Russia. If I go there now, I think Mr. Putin would be very willing to appoint me as the head of a small village." It is hard to imagine a national leader being this shameless. After the EU summit, Putin also held a press conference. He turned it into a personal show, saying with absolute certainty, "I do not believe I should be responsible for the deaths of citizens, because this war was not started by me. It was entirely Ukraine that provoked the war. Zelenskyy is the biggest war criminal. Therefore, I allow Ukraine to hold elections and replace their president. During the election period, we will not attack their territory. As for those Ukrainians already incorporated into Russia, I allow them to vote where they are." He was referring to Ukrainian territories already occupied by Russian forces. Putin arrogantly already regards these places as Russian territory. He also lashed out at the entire NATO alliance on live television. Before the Brussels summit, NATO Secretary General Rutte had called on European countries to prepare for war with Russia. In his remarks, Rutte said, "Putin's continued attacks on Ukraine would inevitably bring devastating consequences to Russia." Putin is extremely vindictive and harbored deep resentment toward Rutte's remarks. After the Brussels summit concluded, Putin confirmed that his overseas assets were safe and then directly addressed Rutte. "Can't you read? Talking about going to war with Russia. Go read the latest U.S. national security strategy. The United States, as NATO's founding country, does not even regard Russia as an enemy." This statement was extremely explicit, just short of saying that Trump is my ally or even my servant. The interest-based community of the dual Putin alliance, at present, indeed appears unbreakable. Putin wants Ukraine, wants to invade all of Europe. Trump wants to make money from war. Each gets what they need, with no conflict of interest whatsoever. Ukraine is being, step by step, pushed into a dead end by them as the war enters its fourth year. In addition to expanding the military to sustain aggression, Putin has also strengthened control over the domestic population. At his press conference, he set up a large screen to display citizens' text messages and online comments. The most eye-catching message on the screen read, "What can we do to help Russia become an empire?" Journalists on site did not even dare to read it aloud, because Putin has always claimed that he became the national leader through democratic elections. If Russia is portrayed as an empire, then what is he? A czar. Another citizen sarcastically commented, "Dear Mr. Vladimir, today is already Friday. May we be allowed to drink a bottle of beer?" This was a jab at a bill signed by Putin to raise the prices of all alcohol and alcoholic products. In order to increase government revenue and fund the war, someone directly questioned Putin why cucumbers in Moscow are more expensive than imported bananas. It seems that prices in Russia have risen to an absurd level. Among these messages, there were also fanatical supporters who directly suggested to Putin, "If our top agents have not yet retired, then deploy them and directly eliminate Zelenskyy." After seeing this message, Putin merely smiled mysteriously and gave no response. Putin had expected to see abundant praise, but instead was provoked into rage by citizens' sharp questions and mockery. He then tore off the microphone from his ear and hysterically shouted, "Russia's economic stagnation is because I ordered a slowdown in economic development. This is to improve economic quality. If Russia were to operate at full capacity, our GDP could surpass the United States at any time." The reason for slowing development is because Europeans are threatening us. Russia must first deal with Europe. After saying this, he announced the end of the press conference and stormed off the stage in anger. It seems that Putin's mental illness is even more severe than Trump, who claims he will cut drug prices by 600%. Russia now cannot even independently produce washing machines. Its total economic output is not even comparable to a single province in mainland China. War requires astronomical sums of money to sustain. Just Ukraine alone has already left Russia half dead. What does Putin have to fantasize about annexing all of Europe? One must know that Russia's economy is not slowing or declining, but has completely collapsed. Putin has no money left. Kim Jong-un sent 15,000 troops to Russia. 7,000 have died. Putin can only pay 20% of the compensation for those 7,000 deaths. Kim Jong-un, who was deceived by Putin, wept bitterly at the memorial service for fallen soldiers, clearly not grieving for the deaths of his people, but regretting trusting this old man Putin. At present, opposition voices within Russia are growing stronger. Putin has already ordered the blocking of multiple social networking platforms. Police are also on high alert, ready to suppress any potential protests. How long can Putin maintain his dictatorship? Is the dual Putin alliance truly invincible on the international political battlefield? Please share your views below the video. At the end of the video, let us look at a sudden incident. Zelenskyy, a few hours ago, convened an emergency meeting, announcing that Ukrainian intelligence agencies have confirmed that Russia has deployed the Oreshnik missile system within Belarus. The assembly of missile warheads has already been completed, and fire control lasers have begun operating. A surprise attack can be launched at any time. Zelenskyy emphasized that much of Europe faces the threat of this strategic missile. The Kiev government has shared the intelligence it holds with Poland, Germany, and other European countries will receive briefings today as well. Zelenskyy stressed that there is no capability in all of Europe to intercept the Oreshnik. The only possibility is for Ukraine to once again deploy special forces. Only Ukraine has ever created a record of destroying Russian intercontinental missiles on Russian soil. Therefore, Kiev needs more support from partners. Silently observing the Ukraine-Russia war may be seen by Putin as weakness to exploit. Although Russia claims it wants peace, the reality is that it has been constantly trying to threaten more countries in order to gain political leverage and brazenly expand its aggression. Even though the EU has abandoned using frozen Russian assets, the threat from Russia has not diminished. Intercontinental missiles with a range exceeding 4,000 kilometers will keep all of Europe awake at night. The next developments in the Ukraine-Russia war will be crucial. If the EU does not increase support for Ukraine, Russian forces will become the deadliest virus, spreading across all of Europe.